Welcome in for Inside Carolina's Transfer Spotlight number 3. Nate McCullum a couple days ago, Tez Walker yesterday, and now offensive lineman Willie Lampkin out of Coastal. 6 foot, 275, I think Mack said on Monday, about 285. Jason, offensive line is a need from North Carolina. Austin Richards moving on to the NFL. Ed Montelis moving on. They've got some bodies there. We really don't know what they have player-wise, simply because they do not play more than 5 ever at North Carolina on offensive line, which is a common theme in college. But Willie Lampkin, what's he bring?
Well, the biggest thing is that you're dealing with someone who can come in and play multiple positions on the interior. So he's played both center and guard. And the thing that, and we saw this a couple of years ago, the thing that will kill an offense faster than anything else is not having someone who can reliably snap the ball and block on that at that interior spot. They ran into that a couple of years ago where basically all their centers got hurt. And they struggled. They had all the pieces around that on offense, but they had a hard time because if you can't hold your water on the interior straight up the A gap, you're gonna have a hard time throwing the football. You're gonna have a hard time running the football, and really all you got left is punting the football. So first of all, you've got to have that position shored up with reasonable depth. You got to have 2-3 guys on your roster that you can count on to snap the ball and be able to block somebody. And so in that sense, he's really important insurance for if Corey Gaynor goes down, for example. I think Gaynor has proven himself as a quality center, and you're probably going to keep him at that spot because of that. But if something happens there, who goes in after him? I mean, Anderson's moving on. You don't have another guy in that spot. You've got to have a reliable body there. And when you go and you look at Lampkin, he was pretty good as a center this last year. So you feel like you've at least got replacement level or better at the center spot if you end up having something happen there. So that's number one. Number two is he actually played guard the year before and was a pretty good guard. So now you've got somebody who can be kind of that swing player that can plug in wherever he's going to be best. And if he's one of your best 5, then he plays either guard or center, wherever that is. Most likely with Gaynor back, you put him at one of the guards. And now he's one of your best 5. If he's not one of your best 5, then he's a guy that rotates in at one of the guard spots or at center. If the center position is dinged up or needs a blow, he can go in and make sure that that there's not a big drop off there. So this is a really valuable type of pickup for Carolina just because of the position flexibility that he brings.
Yeah, and he's got 2 years of eligibility left. He's got some nastiness in him. If you watched him in the bowl game, he's not afraid to put somebody on their back, maybe a little extra on the end. He's got that wrestler in him, and I think that's always good especially for linemen. Is 47-0 as a senior in high school as a wrestler. 47-0 in anything is tough to do. And he was able to do that. He's won all the awards in the Sun Belt for linemen. He freshman All-American, all that stuff, 38 games. North Carolina has some pretty good tape to watch against him because they played Georgia State, and those those defensive linemen that gave North Carolina trouble in that Georgia State game. But Jason, I must ask, and this is the one thing that'll come up forever with Lampkin, is he's 6 feet tall and he's 275, 285 maybe now. We'll see what North Carolina tries to get him to weight-wise as he's come in on January 9th and be ready for spring practice. But he's 6 feet tall, and that is short and small for P5 high-level college football.
Yeah, that's really the downside. That's the thing you concern yourself. That's the thing you're worried about when you bring in this kind of player. The one thing there are a few things about this that you can kind of get into there. One thing you mentioned the wrestling thing. When I popped in what I had of him and I started taking a look and going, what do I think of him? The first thing that came to my mind is this guy had to have wrestled. So that's so obvious on the tape. And so I immediately went to Google and was like, all right, Willie Lampkin wrestling. And then I see, yep, okay, 47-0 as a senior, won the 2A state title in high school in Florida. Okay, yeah. So that makes sense. So number one, you're getting the toughness from that. But the other thing that I love about getting, especially interior offensive linemen with the wrestling background, is they understand how to anchor and understand hand placement and leverage in ways that even if a guy's a little longer or a little bigger, they can oftentimes mitigate that with the things that you learn as a wrestler in terms of how to use your body and all of that. So that's one thing, is that kind of helps in that respect. The other thing is that for an offensive lineman, height matters. You know, 6 foot is short. Height matters, but height matters less than length. What you really look for is not so much how tall a guy is, but how long are his arms. So if he's got longer arms for his height, then it really doesn't matter very much. It actually can be an advantage, because what you want is somebody that the advantage of being longer on the offensive line is that the defensive lineman can't get his hands on you to move you around or to knock you down, knock you one way or the other, and control you with his hands, because you can actually get your hands to him. And it's a game of getting extension and winning in that way. A guy with shorter arms isn't ever able to really get his hands on a defensive lineman, a longer defensive lineman, to be able to control him. So that's really what you're dealing with. And the reason that you value taller offensive linemen is for that. So if you get a guy that's 6'2" with 6'9" wingspan, that's actually in a lot of ways better than a guy that's 6'6", because you're getting somebody that has natural lower leverage, lower center of gravity with the advantage of the length. So this is something that if I were Carolina and I brought him on campus for his official visit, the first thing I'd be doing is measuring his arms. And I don't, I expect that they did that. I mean, knowing Randy, that's something he's going to have done. He's going to have, checked out hand size and arm length, just to determine whether or not, like, is this guy a little bit too stubby to do what I want him to do. So this is where I actually don't know the measurements there. I suspect that if he was an immediate take for Randy, then he's determined that he's long enough through the arms to be able to do what he needs to do in that role. So yeah, that's the thing. Now, you mentioned you wonder what weight they'll want him to play at. Looking at him, just the eye test, I'm not sure there's a whole lot more weight you can really comfortably add to his frame. So, maybe he gets to 290 and you play him there, and yeah, that's light. That's not what they've had on the interior. They were 350 on the interior a couple of years ago. But what you do at that point is you have to have him make up for that as much as he can with quality positioning, and he is really quick-footed. That's the thing. That's one of the things that stood out for me when I watched him, is you could watch him snap the ball and then pull. They actually, at Coastal, they used him as a puller from the center position, and if you can pull your center, that means he's an athlete. And so, a lot of centers just can't pull. They're just not quick enough. He could pull, and he pulled with success, and he got to the second level with success. So the foot quickness and the ability to move on the interior really helps. And if you can get into good position, then sometimes you can mitigate a little bit of that disadvantage in terms of weight and bulk and strength. And the other thing is that I think he does a really good job of sinking his hips and anchoring through a strong lower body. So that helps. But I don't think that this is going to be a guy that's going to be able to drive you back and, just mash you on the goal line. That kind of offensive guard or center that's going to, just physically whip you and be able to do that. I don't think that's what you're getting here. I think you're getting a guy that can win some matchups and anchor well enough, but is not going to physically dominate, some of the better defensive tackles in the ACC. So, I think at this point, excellent depth, an important swing player. If nothing else, he may well be the starter at center in 2024. And again, at center, a 290-pound center who can move and play with great positioning is a really good player. I mean, you see guys in the NFL at 295 sometimes at center, because again, being able to move at that position is so important. And as long as he can sink his hips and anchor, then he'll be fine there. At guard, it might be a little bit light, but again, he may well, with those movement skills and the fundamentals and the ability to anchor that he's shown, and the foot quickness and how good he is as a puller and his ability to get to the second level, he may wind up being one of the best guards on the team and may wind up a starter. He'll compete for it. I think best case scenario is actually that he winds up being a swing backup at center and guard this year, and then probably a starter in 2024. That's your best case, because that would mean that one of the younger guys who's a little bigger wins that guard position, and then he just steps in and naturally takes over the center job next year.
Yeah, and I mentioned the nastiness earlier. He's got it. Mack Brown said this when talking about Willie Lampkin. He's going to make someone in that offensive line room work really hard to keep their job. And that's what North Carolina needs, especially in the trenches. They need nastiness, and they need guys that play with good fundamentals. We've seen all along that it doesn't matter how big you are. If you don't play with fundamentals, you're going to get whipped by somebody that's got them if you don't. That's Jason Staples. I'm Tommy Ashley. Willie Lampkin, offensive line, 6 foot, 275, 285 out of Coastal. Coastal's been pretty good. Lampkin was the leader of that offensive line for the past 3 years. He is now with Randy Clements and North Carolina in the offensive line room. Thanks, Jason.
Thank you, Tommy.